The Zelda series does have some outstanding boss battles, and they are to be found in every Zelda game there is. But there are also a number of games that have mini-bosses, and some of them can be quite as good, if not better than many of the dungeon bosses.
In this video, we are going to take a look at the mini-bosses in the series we think have the most to offer. While the battle itself has to be somewhat enjoyable, we will also focus a lot on other aspects, like if the mini-boss has a backstory, if the atmosphere is any good, possible uniqueness, concept, or if the suspense and build-up is something we consider very good.
As it turns out, there are some mini-bosses that score really well on all of these, and we can't wait to dig into them. But before we start this list, we just have to address something, because we do expect many of you to ask about them. No matter how good these mini-bosses were, the Iron Knuckle and Darknut will not be on our list. Sure, they are mini-bosses too, but we already praised them pretty well in the top 10 coolest enemies list. And we also gave a little nod to them as mini-bosses too. Go check that out if you're interested in hearing our opinion on them, because we want to focus on the more unique ones in this list.
With all of that out of the way, we're the OCARINA, I'm Owner 1.
And I am Owner 2, and these are our top 10 mini-bosses in the series. We start off the list with a game of Dead Man's Volley, but it isn't just anyone we challenge for this round, as the shadowy figure of Phantom Ganon from Wind Waker makes his entrance.
You fight him twice in this game. The appearance of him is really cool, especially when you consider the cel-shaded visuals of this game. The completely black color with the blue lines around him makes him look like a really evil entity.
The battle at the Forsaken Fortress is pretty much no different from the battle against Ganondorf in Ocarina of Time. But the second encounter makes him worthy of being on this list.
You face him again inside Ganon's tower. The battle is still similar, with him shooting an energy ball that you have to hit back and forth with him, and at times he'll use the attack where he shoots multiple balls of dark energy that will bounce back with a spin attack. And he'll also have fake clones of himself. But it's the concept of the battle in here that makes Phantom Ganon just a bit more unique.
Link finds himself in a maze of rooms where there's only one correct door that allows you to proceed. How do you find out which way to go? By seeing where the hilt of Phantom Ganon's sword points as it falls to the ground.
That is very cryptic if you don't pay attention, but it's also very interesting in our opinion. For how standard the actual battle against Phantom Ganon is, we still appreciate seeing a new incarnation of him, and a cryptic and interesting concept, in addition to a battle theme that is a mix between several previous encounters against Ganon and Ganondorf, which is why we decided to place him at number 10. Alright, this list will be very dominated by mini-bosses from the 3D games, but here's the one 2D mini-boss we're including.
Link's Awakening was the first game to really implement real unique mini-bosses inside its dungeons, and the mini-boss in Catfish's Maw is an interesting one. You encounter him when entering a room with a floor with a big skull symbol on it.
All of a sudden, an awesome looking Stalfos knight falls down and you get to fight him. This is Master Stalfos, and after knocking him down and letting a bomb explode on him 3 times, he says that he can't defeat you and runs off. The battle itself isn't much different from Stalfos Knights in A Link to the Past, but it's what happens afterwards that makes him so interesting to us.
As you might think you have defeated the mini-boss of the dungeon and are ready to collect the item in the chests next door, you only find a note from the Master Stalfos telling you that he has taken the item with him, and that you need to track him down. And how do you find him?
Well, the room we fought him in had that symbol on the floor and one block in the upper left corner. That got us thinking back to other rooms that had the same symbol and a different number of blocks in the corners. And that's what this mini-boss is, a puzzle.
Again, the way of fighting him is incredibly simple, and the fact that he's probably the coolest looking 8-bit version of any Stalfos we have seen doesn't automatically put him on this list. We like this mini-boss more because of the concept. You fight him in 4 different rooms with the same symbol, and in the order of the number of blocks you find in the corners, as he always says he can't beat you, but stubborn as he seems to be, he won't give up easily.
He means so much more to the dungeon because of this. You don't just fight some random mini-boss and claim the item. He runs off with it, and you have to hunt him down by finding these rooms. You might even have seen some of the rooms before encountering him the first time, and you might see some of the rooms after.
In the end, we think Master Stalfos has a really fun and unique concept, and that is why he earns number 9 on our list.
Majora's Mask has 4 different regions outside of Clocktown, each with their own residing or ruling race. The most interesting to us among these 4 is definitely the desolate Ikana Kingdom.
The region of Ikana is a big area covered with dust, curses and death. For the most part, the only sort of living beings there are already dead. Before Link arrived in Termina, there had been a war going on between the Ikana Kingdom and the Garos. What does this have to do with mini-bosses? Our number 8 just happens to reside inside Ikana Castle, and he is none other than King Eagos du Ikana.
As we've sort of explained already, Ikana is his kingdom. Being under the curse coming from the open doors of Stone Tower Temple caused by Skull Kid, he now hides in the shadows along with his 2 servants, who used to be the most skilled swordsmen in their days.
You fight the 2 servants in front of the king's throne after going through Ikana Castle, and pretty similar to the Master Stalfos, they will fall down on the ground after striking them enough. However, bombs are not effective here, and they will just rise up and continue to fight.
That is until you realize that they are hiding from the light that they blocked out right before the battle started. By using the fire arrows to let the sunlight in and reflect it onto their fallen bodies, you will rid them of this curse.
When both servants are out of the battle, the king himself will draw his weapon and take you on. He can both take and do more damage. His attacks are jump attacks, spewing out poisonous gas, and he can even have his head set loose and chase you while his body attacks, which we are unfortunate not to have footage of.
The battle is pretty fun, but we like the rich backstory and how we help freeing the kingdom from the curse that has been laid upon them. After the curse is lifted from them, the king helps you out by teaching you the Elegy of Emptiness, and puts his trust in Link to free the kingdom from all the cursed undeath that roams the region. Now we are moving on to a mini-boss that I, personally, actually find pretty challenging. Twilight Princess is a great, but also a very easy game. It's easy to avoid dying, and oftentimes easy to avoid taking damage, which is a bit too bad when the game has a very fun emphasis on sword combat. However, Snowpeak Ruins is a place that actually upped the difficulty a bit.
The place didn't have hearts lying around. It had many enemies like the Chillfoes and Freezard that were tough to fight and that could freeze you to do even more damage. In addition, it had the badass mini-boss known as Darkhammer.
Darkhammer is this beast of a mini-boss. Its appearance looks likely to be a Lizzle or Dinalfoss inside a suit of armor, and he uses a devastating ball and chain. The armor covers almost the entire body, but the tail is uncovered, which means that's the weak spot. What makes this battle a bit difficult is the narrow space in the room.
The swinging ball and chain has a reach almost from grid to grid, making it impossible for you to just walk around him without getting hit. You have a couple of options to either roll underneath, which requires good timing, or you could use the claw shot on the grid above you to get behind, or either take a hit or avoid taking a hit from the ball and chain after he throws it and get behind him to attack.
What we find a bit difficult and appreciate about this mini-boss is that it actually takes some planning and timing to get around him. Oftentimes you find bosses and mini-bosses in circular rooms, with enough room to make it easier to get around. But with a narrow space here, it's really easy to get damaged.
Sure, if you get the hang of it, it can be really easy. But even so, most bosses are like that, and we feel this one brings up a bit more of a challenge, even though a mortal draw can be enough to take him out.
One last thing we love about this mini-boss is that you actually pick up his weapon afterwards. No item is hidden in a chest, but his ball and chain is left on the ground for you to grab. So that's pretty cool.
We've talked about it a lot before, but we just can't get over how amazingly creepy Dead Hand really is. What makes him appear on our list isn't the difficulty or anything, cause he isn't really that hard to defeat, but it's because of the sheer horror he brings to the game.
You face him twice. The first time is inside the bottom of the well as young Link, as a child. The bottom of the well was already a pretty creepy place, but entering this room changed the creepiness to a whole other level. The first things you see in the room are long white arms with sharp red nails sticking out of the ground, And if you look closely, the floor and walls are all made out of skulls.
Since nothing is happening, you're probably drawn to the arm sticking out of the ground. When you go for a closer inspection, you'll get grabbed by it, and a horrifying dead hand will bury itself up. The hand will hold you as this Resident Evil worthy monster slowly moves towards you in the creepiest fashion. It doesn't seem to have legs, it stretches its head up towards the ceiling, and its body is covered by spots of blood. When it moves closer, it will try to use its wide mouth to bite your head.
Again, the battle isn't very hard, as you can get loose from the arm before it strikes you and you can attack it yourself. However, it'll bury itself down again and won't come back up until you either let yourself get grabbed or if you destroy enough of the arms to lure it back up.
The strategy doesn't change during the battle, and there's only a tiny tweak or two to the second encounter inside the Shadow Temple. The first thing to notice is that the number of hands have expanded, and they now have a different formation. In addition, you have the Lens of Truth, which actually allows you to see where Dead Hand is hiding, and a bomb placed upon it can lure it out.
Neither one of us knew about the function of the Lens of Truth in this battle until just a few years ago, and me myself always used the strategy of getting grabbed by the arms to lure it out. I was always so nervous about doing it because I knew what would be coming to get me, but it was also the only way I knew of.
Dead Hand is a fine miniboss when it comes to the actual fighting, but everything surrounding it, from the atmosphere to the concept of him being this abomination hiding underground and have these creepy arms help it catch its prey, is something we find very unique. Besides, bosses should be intimidating in some way. Wouldn't you say Dead Hand did a great job there?
Oh yes. Skyward Sword had its fair share of mini-bosses. I mean, they did have a few inside the dungeons that were enemies you could fight many other places too, which we're not a fan of when it comes to mini-bosses, and that we might rather count as common enemies instead. But there were still a couple that stood out. And no matter how awesome we think the four-armed Stallmaster in the ancient system was, we're actually not including that one. The other one we really like is found on board the Sandship.
Since the Sandship had been hijacked by pirates, it's only fitting that the miniboss should be a pirate captain in LD-002 Servo, or just Servo for short. Of course, he's a robot like the rest of the ancient robots in the Lanayru region, but he has a much more of a skeletal appearance than the rest you've seen. You fight him really early in the dungeon, but the battle is a very exciting and intense one.
Just as traditional a pirate captain should be, he wears a pirate hat, has an eye patch, has facial hair, and wields a sword in his right hand and has a big hook on his left. Sort of like Darkhammer, you fight this guy in a really narrow space. The battle has 3 phases, where you have a lot of room on the linear board you're standing on to fight him the first round.
This is a fun motion-controlled sword battle, and you fight in a way that's common for the game. He'll use his drill sword to block attacks, and you have to push him to the edge behind him, while he tries to push you to the spikes behind you. The phase ends when he almost falls off, as he pulls out another sword after losing his first, and the spikes behind you close in and make the platform smaller for each phase.
The battle continues in the same way, but after losing his second sword, he has to resort to his hook, which he uses to attack with by spinning his upper body and with strikes with charged electricity. It's mostly about striking him as much as you can, but is not always predictable in where you can block your attacks, which makes the battle a lot of fun. It is also worth mentioning that it's incredible how this robot had survived for as long as he had, as the rest of the ancient robots were all dysfunctional at present time, which Fi even points out after the battle.
There is another battle like this inside the Sky Keep with another one called Dreadfuse, which isn't all that different other than with its appearance and that he uses the sword in his left hand, but we include only Servo here since his role made much more sense of being on board the Sandship, and that we got to show him off in a piratey fashion by making him walk the plank. Arr, matey.
It can be argued that the Force Temple had multiple mini-bosses. Some say that the Stalfos duo guarding the bow is a mini-boss, and it technically is. Also, ZeldaWiki.org even counts Meg as the only mini-boss among the Poe sisters. But to us, it's all 4 of them that claim the number 4 spot.
We absolutely love the concept these 4 poes are behind. Sure, maybe the 2 Stalfos took the role of guarding the dungeon item, but the Poe sisters took away the opportunity for us to reach the boss of the dungeon, and we really think all of them deserve to be called a mini-boss.
We think it's so cool when you first enter the main room and see the 4 different torches with fire of different, beautiful colors that get taken away by each sister, and they all hide around the dungeon, making this place feel even more haunted than it already does.
The first 2, Joel and Beth, are fought in the same way, but it's in a way we really like. In 2 mirroring staircases in different rooms, there are 3 image frames on the walls where a sister hides in one of them. If you get too close, she'll switch frame. In order to make it appear in a physical form and get a flame back, you first have to keep your distance and shoot an arrow while she's still there, until all frames are gone, and then you get to fight her like a more regular Poe.
As soon as one is defeated, its flame will return to the torch close by and in the main room. The third one is a puzzle of blocks, where an image of Amy has to be completed within a time limit before you fight her.
Then there's Meg, who has now appeared in the main room, and she takes you on with 3 mirror images of herself surrounding you. You need to shoot an arrow at the real one, which is revealed by her taking a spin. Once she has been hit enough times, the purple flame will return to the 4th torch, and the elevator is now ready for use.
The difficulty with each Poe sister is not hard, but the idea of having 4 ghostly figures with these different colors hide away around the dungeon, inside frames and whatnot, is so very intriguing to us. It creates variety to each of them, and it only adds to the atmosphere of the dungeon in general. There are some mini-bosses that play a big role in a dungeon, like with the Poe sisters, but there are also mini-bosses that play a big role in the entire game. An example of that can be found in Twilight Princess, and the one we're pointing towards is our number 3 mini-boss in the series, King BULBLIN.
King BULBLIN is a character that keeps appearing one way or another throughout the game. His first appearance is when he and his BULBLIN minions break into Orden Spring, knocking out Link, kidnapping both Elia and Colin, and opening a Twilight portal before running away into the Twilight covered parts of Ordona and Hyrule. Already before you visit the first dungeon in the game, or even the Twilight, you have your motivation to fight this beast.
It's later revealed that Colin made it back to Kakariko Village, but that Elia was still missing. Your first encounter with King BULBLIN is when he and his minions invade the village after you get the Iron Boots, where they take Colin with them again. This is a great way to have you try out the mounted combat that this game put a more focus on than earlier in the series. You fight them out in the open fields of Hyrule before you square off at the Bridge of Eldin with no way to escape.
Here, you ride towards each other and you have to knock him off the bridge with 2 strikes as you pass each other. It's pretty simple, but Link strikes off an epic pose afterwards, and that's worth a point in itself. But even with Colin's save, he doesn't stop there.
You find Elia at a later point, trying to save the Zora Prince, Rallis, and you help out Telma and her by escorting them to Kakariko Village and Renato from Castle Town. Again, the minions will do everything to prevent that from happening, like setting the wagon on fire.
At one point he's back for a rematch, but this time on the Great Bridge of Hylia, and he's not gonna let you strike him with your sword again, now that he has a shield on each side of him. This is where the bow is very effective.
But even after sending him off 2 different bridges, he still won't stay down. When you make your way through Gerudo Desert to reach Arbiter's grounds, wouldn't you think that this monster would come out of a dark corner for another fight? This time though, you're both on your feet, fighting with sword against axe.
Once again, he's not really hard to defeat, as he's widely open for attacks, but his huge axe can really deal out some pain, just like the Bulbo probably feels before the fight. Does he die this time though? Nope. He walks off, injured and all, and sets the hut on fire. Clearly, this isn't over just yet.
The final time you fight him is in the courtyard of Hyrule Castle. As you walk onto a big platform, walls of magic surround you, and King BULBLIN drops down from out of nowhere and challenges you again. The fight is very similar to the previous one. However,
what's surprising after the battle here is that he starts speaking. Granted, he did say a line before the battle, but he now says that he'll follow the strongest side after giving you the key you need, before he rides off to fight another day. It's strange to see a mini-boss, especially one that you fight this many times, that doesn't die.
King BULBLIN was a persistent one. You fight him several times from beginning to end, and he manages to stay relevant all the way through the game. The battles are easy, which is a tiny bit bad, but also varied, which is good. He had fun battles to offer and played an important role in the game with the kidnapping of the Ordonians, which is why he makes the top 3. If there is one mini-boss from the same game that can top King Bulblin, it's one with an amazing mystique and atmospherical advantage, in addition to an absolutely awesome design and a sort of unique way of battling. And to find the one we are describing, we have to go to Arbiter's grounds.
We love the atmosphere of the room where the mini-boss exists. You walk in and you don't hear anything else than the music.
No enemies or torches making sounds.
It's dark, there's dust in the air, and there's a huge black sword stuck to the ground.
Threads with tags hanging onto them, and circles with symbols on the floor are surrounding it all.
You cut the thread, and the inscriptions on the sword turn red before the threads burn away, and it starts moving up in the air.
What it seems like is that you have broken the seal that kept some evil, spiritual being from roaming freely by itself. But you still can't really see exactly what you have unsealed.
The sword will just attack you by itself, until it may occur to you that the wolf form can sense stuff the human form can't. And all of a sudden, there's a ghostly figure carrying the sword with black smoke coming out of it.
It's when it strikes that it becomes vulnerable, and after attacking enough, you see the real physical form of the being only known as Death Sword.
The build-up here is fantastic. Every second from when you enter the room until the monster is revealed is great. The music builds up slowly for each step you are closer to revealing its incredibly awesome appearance. Looking like an undead devilish Grim Reaper kind of being with a black robe and sword. And the battle
is also pretty good. Death Sword will start hovering pretty high in the air and move around you in a circle while casting some kind of magic bolts at you. To do more damage to him, you can either shoot an arrow at him, use the claw shot, or use the Gale Boomerang to make him attack you at a closer range.
That's when he starts circling around you faster before descending to strike you with his sword, and that's when you have the opportunity to strike with yours.
After doing that a couple of times, he will turn invisible again, and you will need the wolf senses to reveal him another time.
This might repeat depending on how long it'll take you to do enough damage, and in the end, they'll just burst up to what seems like thousands of tiny bats or moths, or at least something that just flies away.
Again, the build-up and the mystique of this creature is something we're very intrigued by, and the battle is pretty fun as well. It's actually the only mini-boss battle, or boss battle in general in this game, that requires you to switch back and forth between human and wolf form.
In addition, that sort of roar you hear when the seal is broken and the sword lifts itself up sounds like the same you hear as soon as you enter the dungeon. Could it be that he even lets his presence be known to any intruder who makes its first step into this place? We think that's awesome. Of course, you probably guessed this beforehand, and now that you've seen number 10 through 2, there's no use in hiding who's on top. Our number 1 miniboss in the series is Dark Link.
You know what? They could have just dropped this dark, shadow version of Link into a bland room and have us fighting like we do, and that would already make an awesome miniboss battle. But the developers just went all out with this one, and in our opinion, it's pretty much as good as a miniboss can ever get.
The Dark Link encounter in the Water Temple did pretty much everything right. Just like with Death Sword, there's a mystique to him and the surroundings. It's atmospheric, and the battle itself is awesome. We gotta question why this couldn't have been a miniboss in the Shadow Temple, with Dead Hand already being in the bottom of the well. But maybe the water in the battle room was for the better in this fight.
Because when you enter the room inside the Water Temple, it's different from anything you have seen so far. It's not a normal room, it's an open area. No walls, just the doors, a tiny little island with a dead tree on it, some sort of ruins here and there, and shallow water surrounding all of it.
And again, the water does matter here. what you're fighting is actually your reflection. We have to confess that we never noticed it until Danny from Game Grumps pointed it out in the recent playthrough of this game. But you see Link's reflection in the water as you walk towards the little island. However, when you walk off of it again, the reflection is gone. That's when you can see the shadowy figure of Link standing next to the tree, because the reflection stayed behind.
That is such an awesome detail. Dark Link doesn't seem to fully appear until you've checked the door on the other side of the room. But after you've done it and approach him, the battle is on. Since he is a shadow doppelganger of Link, he will mirror every attack you do with your sword.
He is really tough to damage if you have him locked in C targeting, but easier to hit if you don't use it. His appearance is very transparent in the beginning, but he gradually becomes darker, and while that is happening, he's also becoming more aggressive.
He's a bit more defensive in the beginning, but will start attacking you more and more the longer the battle drags on. He can easily strike and damage you after a while. And we think it's awesome how he just humiliates you if you go for a thrust attack. If you try that, he'll jump onto your sword and stand there for a second before he backflips off. Depending on how transparent or not he is, he'll either just jump right off or attack you before he does.
There are easy ways to defeat him, like with the big Goron sword, the Megaton hammer, Din's fire among other things. But the most intense and fun way to battle him is Master Sword against Dark Master Sword, I guess. Trying out the sword against sword tactic is a lot of fun, as far from every strike will land a hit on him.
What's also really unique about this mini-boss is that every time you do hit him, he'll fall down through the floor and another one will appear. The number of times you have to defeat him actually reflects the number of heart containers Link has at the time of the battle. That is awesome!
The challenge really ties to the way of sword against sword, because he'll probably land a number of hits on you and doing a lot of damage, and that is something we really love. There are multiple ways in beating him, either the challenging way or simpler ways, very similar to the battle in Adventure of Link. The build-up is amazing, and how they created such an incredible atmosphere and concept of this battle is outstanding, and the different ways you can fight him makes it a very open encounter where you can sort of choose your own difficulty.
And when the battle is over, the open area disappears, and it turns out you were just fighting inside a regular room after all. What was this place? What was this kind of battle we just fought?
I'll tell you what, it was the best mini-boss experience we've ever had in the Legend of Zelda series. Boy, that was a long video, wasn't it? We hope you didn't find it too long, and if you enjoyed it, would you kindly throw us a like? Please leave a comment about what you think of our list and video, and of course mention your own favorite mini-bosses.
And if you don't want to miss out on any future videos, remember to subscribe, as we're taking you to our next list, the top 5 mountain themes. Thanks for watching, and we hope to see you again.